Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to talk about the various methods of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is a technique of assessing or measuring the performance of an employee. Now, measurement of the performance of an employee is important for any organization because if there is any deviation from the set standards in the performance of the employee, then in that case the deviations can be corrected by giving the necessary training to the employee. Further assessment of the performance of the employee also helps the employee, also helps the employee in getting, a feedback regarding their work. Now, the feedback can be both positive as well as negative. Apart from that, the assessment of the performance of an employee also helps the organization to take decisions like promotions, transfers, demotions, and various other important decisions. So basically, a performance appraisal is important for any organization. However, the techniques, tools, and methods of performance appraisal which are used in organizations differ from organization to organization depending on the kind of industries and the kind of skills which are required for the employees to do the work. Now, let's assess some of the important methods of performance appraisal. The various methods of performance appraisal can be bifurcated into traditional methods and modern methods. Now, among the traditional methods of performance appraisal, the first method is the ranking method. Now, a ranking method is the simplest and the oldest method of performance appraisal, which helps in measuring the performance of the employee. Now, in the case of a ranking method, the performance of an employee is compared to the performance of all the other employees in the organization. Like, let's take an example, there are 30 employees in an organization. Then in that case, the performance of all the 30 employees is measured, and then all the 30 employees are ranked, which means ranks are given from first rank till the 30th rank. Now, this method of performance appraisal is, like I said, is one of the oldest methods and of performance appraisal. However, this method of performance appraisal suffers from one major drawback, in the sense that though employees are ranked one after the other, it does not tell how much better or worse one employee's performance is compared to another. The next method of performance appraisal is paired comparison method. Now, in this method, each employee is compared with the other employees on one-on-one basis, usually based on one trait only. Like, maybe we are comparing the employees on the basis of the work completed, like how well the employee completes their work on as per the scheduled time. Now, in this case, the number of employees, number of times this employee is compared as better with the other employees determines their final ranking. Basically, the paired comparison method is an improvement of the ranking method, and like I said, in the case of paired comparison method, the listing of the employees is made on a more systematic basis when compared to the simple ranking which is given under the ranking method. And under this method, every employee is compared to all the other employees and at a single time. However, this method, since in this method every employee's performance is compared to the other employees, therefore this method is suitable only when the number of employees is limited. Next we have is the grading method. Now, in this method, certain categories of worth or grades are established and carefully defined, and the employees under the various categories or various job levels are evaluated based on the grades. Like, maybe we have to compare the performance of an employee, grades such as outstanding performance, satisfactory performance, and unsatisfactory performance may be given, and employee's performance is compared with these grades. So, if an employee, so whenever supposing we have two employees, Mr. A, Mr. B, so Mr. A's performance will be evaluated whether based on whether it is outstanding, satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. Similarly, Mr. B's performance will be evaluated based on whether it is satisfactory, outstanding, or unsatisfactory. Now after this we have the forced distribution method. Now this method was adopted by Mr. Tiffin, and this method aims at eliminating the ratings which are given to the employees. Generally, if they are generally in case the employees are given ratings on the higher scale. So sometimes the raters, if they do not want to, rate any, they suffer from biases, or if they have this leniency aspect, the raters generally in such cases try to award, good ratings to all the employees. So when good ratings are given to all the employees, the basic purpose of assessing the performance of the employee is not achieved, because the rater is being biased and they are not, not doing the ratings in a just manner. So basically, in the case of forced distribution method, the employees are distributed throughout the scale. Like maybe, when, if supposing there are 100% employees in the organization, then all the employees must be distributed among in this 100%, which means that some employees must be graded or given grades between 0 to 10%, then some employees between 10 to 20, some employees between 20 to 30, some employees between 30 to 40. So basically this is useful for rating a large number of employees' performance, and this method helps in eliminating or reducing biases. The next method we have is forced choice method. In this forced choice method is developed by J.P. Guilford, and this method contains a series of statements, like under the forced choice method, both positive as well as negative statements are included, and the you know in the based on the various statements, each statement tries to describe whether the individual being evaluated, whether the individual is satisfactory in their performance of work or not. Like some of the positive statements which could be included is, can the employee be depended upon to complete any job assigned, or is the employee trustworthy? Negative statements could be like, will the employee is the employee favoring some other employees, like that. So basically in this the forced choice method, the employee's performance is evaluated based on the various statements, positive and negative statements. The next method which we have is the checklist method. In this checklist method, a series of statements is given, and with the answers like yes or no is prepared by the HR department, and then it is presented to the appraisers, and the appraisers would tick based on their evaluation of the appraisee's work, will tick their answers using the checklist method. And once the checklist is completed, it is again sent back to the HR department, and based on the checklist, the HR department prepares the final scores of the employees. The next method is so under critical incidence method, the performance of the employee is rated based on certain events which may not have happened. Some examples of incidents are whether there is any incident where the employee has refused to cooperate with the co-workers, or if there is any incident where the employee has refused to undergo further training. So based on these incidents, the performance of the employee is evaluated. The next method is the essay method. Now in the case of an essay method, this is a very freestyle of rating method, wherein the appraisers are free to write an essay on the appraisees regarding their strengths, weaknesses, their accomplishments, the scope for potential development and all. And lastly, we have the field review method. Now under this method, a trained employee from a personnel department will interview the supervisors about their respective subordinates, and supervisors are asked to give their opinion about the various subordinates regarding their job performances and their progress at work. And on the basis of this, the HR department specialist prepares the detailed notes. Then these notes are again approved by the supervisors and placed in the personal folder of the employee. So this method is generally useful for large organizations with a large number of employees. But however, the success of this method depends only if the interviewer is properly trained and has the competence to interview. So these were the various traditional methods of performance appraisal. Now let's move on to the modern methods of performance appraisal. The first modern method of performance appraisal is management by objectives, that is MBO. This method was propounded or founded by Peter F. Drucker way back in the year 1954. Now, this method requires the managers, the immediate managers, to set goals with for each of their employees, and then periodically discuss how the employee has progressed towards achieving these goals. So basically in an MBO program, there are four main steps. First is goal setting, where the manager as well as the employee try to set the goals which have to be achieved. Then performance standard basically helps the employee in in identifying the various methods which have to be adopted in order to achieve the goals. Then a comparison is made to find out the actual performance with the set standards. And lastly, we have a periodic review. So in the goal setting method, which is the MBO, goals are set with each individual has to attain, and basically these goals are established by the superior as well as the subordinate jointly. Now the purpose of conducting this or adopting the MBO method is because this method is a more objective type of performance appraisal compared to the other methods. And generally this one example of the MBO method of performance appraisal being used is Larsen and Turbo Company, that is L&T. They use the management by objectives method of performance appraisal. However, this method also suffers from certain limitations, like sometimes unmeasurable or unrealistic goals may be set. So this hampers the MBO process. Further, this is also very time consuming process, and there is also a little lack of trust in case the subordinate does not trust the manager. So these are some of the drawbacks of the management by objectives method. The next method of performance appraisal is behaviorally anchored rating scales, also known as bars. This method was adopted or identified way back in the year 1960s. Now it combines the benefits of various methods like critical incident method, quantitative rating methods and all. So basically developing or utilizing this behaviorally anchored rating scales involves 5 main steps. The first step is generating the critical incidents, then developing the performance dimensions or the performance standards during these critical incidents, then reallocating the various incidents to other groups of employees, and then scaling the incidents. That means identifying the rating scales to be given for these incidents. Now basically the bars methods of performance appraisal is considered better than the traditional ones because it provides more advantages like a more accurate method of assessing the performance, and it provides better feedback and also ensures consistency in evaluation. Okay, so the next method of performance appraisal is the assessment centers. Now this assessment centers method was first used way back in 1930s in Germany, and basically assessment centers method was used to assess the performance of or to appraise the army officers. However, this concept gradually spread to other countries like US, UK in 1940s and to Britain in 1960s. Now basically in India, the assessment centers method is used by companies like Hindustan Lever, Crompton Greaves, and in the case of assessment centers are basically these methods are basically used for evaluating the executive or supervisory potential. Now in case of an assessment center, the managers have to gather at a central location, and then they have to participate in well designed simulated exercises, and they are assessed by the senior managers, and generally the assessment is done for a period of 2 to 3 days. Now the assessee is asked to participate in various in-basket exercises, various games, work groups and role plays, and based on their performance in these exercises, the assessee's behavior is recorded, and the raters meet in order to discuss their pooled information and then give their assessment about the assessee. The next method of performance appraisal is the 360-degree appraisal. Now this method of appraisal was first adopted or first used by General Electric Company of USA in 1992, and in India we have various big companies like Reliance, Wipro, Infosys, Thomas Cook who are using this method. Now this method of performance appraisal helps or makes an assessment of the employee's performance throughout the year, because generally what happens is, if the employees see, if the assessment is made once in 3 months or once in 6 months, the employees will try to rectify their performance just before the assessment is made. Whereas in the case of a 360-degree performance appraisal, the performance of the employee is done all around, and moreover the performance of the employee is assessed not only by the superiors but also by the subordinates, peers and customers with whom they interact. And all these appraisers provide information or feedback regarding the performance of the employee. And once this information is gathered, it is through a computerized system, individualized reports are prepared, and a 360-degree feedback, or rather an all-round feedback, is given to the employees. So this method of performance appraisal is a very realistic method, and it is used by a variety of by a number of big organizations. The last method of performance appraisal is cost accounting method, and this method evaluates an employee's performance based on how much the organization will benefit when they retain the employee. So basically this method helps in ascertaining a relationship between the costs which is involved to retain the employee and the benefit an organization derives from the employee. So these are the various traditional and modern methods of performance appraisal.